as taboo or as hard to talk about as some of the 4-letter words. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had some discussion, and let's get started. On our thoughts and our connections to sex, actually, which is going to vary a lot. And please write down your questions. Okay.
So, I mean, I guess to kind of start, I think one of the things we should probably share is when we first thought about doing this video, we were all, not really on the same page or didn't really know what we even wanted to talk about. I know me personally, I was a bit confused, more because I felt like, well, what are we talking about as it relates to sex? Cassie, had shared that she was excited to get this conversation out here and going, and I'm like, okay, what are you excited about? I mean, don't get me wrong, sex is exciting, but I didn't understand what the message was or what it was we were trying to convey that was going to be so, so great to talk about. And through that conversation, myself, Cassie, Michelle, and Heather all got together to talk about how we view sex. And a lot of, Cassie, I'll let you maybe ask some of the questions you posed during our chat session that really kind of got us going as it related to sex and what we wanted to share here today.
Yeah, I think the part that we started off first was just our initial thoughts about sex when we were younger. I think we talked about our first times, the narratives that came with those first times, whether we felt like we did it the right way within a marriage or relationship or whatever we were told was the right way to do it, or whether we did it, quote unquote, the wrong way outside of marriage, too young, and what kind of story we started telling ourselves about ourselves because we did it too young or too soon or not soon enough, or because our friends did it and we did, or we didn't do it. There was a lot of stories that came behind that really molded who we are as women, and Lee, you're as well as men, in our relationship with sex and our relationship with ourselves. So that was kind of the first thing that we discussed.
Yeah, and the reason I was confused originally was because I was thinking, well, sex is about connection to yourself. In my mind, it was about how you are either connected or disconnected with yourself, and you're using potentially sex as an outlet to connect because you're so disconnected from yourself. And so that kind of kicked us off with, to Cassie's point about us talking about our experiences. And I personally had said, I had sex later in life at a quote unquote young age, which now, looking back, wasn't really that young. I guess young is relative, but anyway, I was 18 when I had sex, and I didn't, I think a lot of the reason, and I think Heather, you mentioned this when we talked offline, just about how during that time when you're 18 or 17 or however old you are, you're talking about sex and you it's almost like a competitive thing. You've got your friends around you and they're having sex, and then you're feeling like, oh, maybe you're not, included in that because you're not having sex, and so you want to begin to be a part of that. And so we started to have that conversation of how is that showing up for us, or for teenagers, and why? Like, why is it what someone else is doing so important to me? Why do I feel like I need to be, playing that game or being competitive when I'm choosing to share my body or not to share my body with someone? What story have we told as a society that has gotten us so disconnected that as a teenager we have these feelings?
Mine was definitely peer pressure. Like, it was real peer pressure. I was only 13 years old. It was deep peer pressure from other girls who were already engaging, and and I wasn't. I was so impressionable and so naive, and the youngest, and sisters were already gone out of the house, so I was kind of coerced into my first time. And from there it just that chipped away at me immediately, obviously, and it was not a good situation to find myself in. And then the trend continued from there. And then I got into, a long relationship, which again changed my perspective and the way I viewed sex. And for me, it was if that was good, then everything was okay. As long as that was okay between us, then the relationship had to be in good shape. So I put a lot of weight on that, unsuspectingly, really not understanding that for men, it seems like that would be fulfilling to them and that would be okay, but they're deep too. They want more than just sex in that kind of relationship. So
Right.
that led me to that place. And now as I'm no longer in, a long-term relationship. I'm not in any relationship. I'm just with myself. It changed my perspective again. And I only want, my connection. I only want to be with my connection. And that's another change that has occurred. And it's all because of the experiences that I've had. And I think that's the only way we come across, how we perceive it is by our own experiences and our upbringing, right?
And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think too, to kind of add to, and I think we had said this too when we had all talked, but to add to that, being that young and being impressionable, I can speak from my own experience. I was 19 years old. I actually started having sex out of heartbreak. And I ended up sleeping with most of the men that I have in my life within a very short period of time. I was in the military. That's all I'm going to say. However, what ended up was this narrative that I can't trust myself. I can't trust my decision-making process when it comes to my sexuality, when it comes to men, when it comes to attracting them, to make healthy decisions. And that was a really strong and hard narrative to overcome because it was so deep-rooted. I felt so sick over me making those decisions. And I had to...
You had to figure out why you were doing that so you could, address and change the behavior into something that made you feel more whole.
But like you said, it creates this cycle. It creates
Yes.
this cycle of when you start hating yourself for something and
Yeah.
you start saying that I'm not good enough to make the right decisions, then you start sleeping with people you're not supposed to.
I can put a real interesting spin on this subject of how a cycle does continue, as there's going to be an awful lot of people out there who actually can relate to this and want to know how to really to go into healing over this. Because my view on sex is completely different than most people's, as I lost my virginity at 11 unwillingly to my stepfather who was molesting me. So I didn't know anything about sex for pleasure or sex for good things until much later in life. So I went into my teenage years thinking that sex was a punishment. And also a tool. It was dirty, right? It was dirty and shameful. So as I got into my teenage years, I did learn to use sex as a weapon. When I got into my earlier adult years, I got married I got married at very early 19, turned 18 in June, got married in July. Wasn't pregnant, but I also didn't elaborate on my sexual history, right? Because the first person that I did that with, that I was having sex with, I believe the first time I actually had sex for pleasure or with someone else, I was 15 maybe. And so I didn't bring that into the marriage where I was marrying. So I had to pretend to have a healthy sex life. And he wasn't aware until a little bit later on what I had been through. But as I got even older, I learned to also use sex as a weapon, as a punishment, right? And would do that a lot, right? And in a lot of different ways. And having a healthy sex life after you've had such a bad experience with it is a struggle. Sometimes even now it's a struggle as things sort of, come full circle and come back around. And I've, gone into healing over it, and I talk about it an awful lot, when we're coaching, but turning it and having healthy boundaries now. If there's something going on, if there's something wrong, it could be anything from, clearly if Lee's passing a kidney stone, that's the last thing that's on his mind. But I'm going to feel rejected.
Right.
I'm going to feel rejected because we're not intimate in that way. I'm going to feel like he doesn't love me. He doesn't want to be with me. Is my nose too big today? Or am I not, am I not skinny enough today? Or am I bloated or anything today? Right. And it could be anything from my toenails paint's chipped today. It could be anything from that to
today.
Complete
that
opposite.
that resonates with me very much too, Sherry. With
It just puts a whole little different spin on having a healthy sexual relationship and learning to enjoy being with someone intimately and sexually, and actually learning what it really is and what it really means. Right. And I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say every one of us has had a sexual experience that we didn't care for. Okay? And we just participated.
Names, right?
It just participated, right? Like we all feel like we took a few for the team, right?
Yes.
And
it's sad because we're all describing our first experiences and our exposure to the whole idea. And we also talked about in the last video, the last time we all chatted, that as a society, we have this disconnect to what sex really is or what it could be to us and to our partner. And, my kids, when we went for the talk at school on the way home, I mean, it was just strict scientific. And on the way home, we were like, oh my goodness, there's so much more to it. There was no emotional stuff, and there's so much that's involved. And it's sad because I wish we could have some kind of sex education for kids so they could get a better idea of what it's about, and then maybe they wouldn't be so pressured, because we all have stories of feeling like that we were peer pressure, or we didn't do it yet. I felt like I was 19, and, I was probably felt like the last one who had never, everybody else did it but me. So it's like, it's all a plan for instead of really understanding what it is, how it can be a tool for healing or a tool for connection instead of this society's ideas thrown at us.
Well, and that inner child stuff too, when it comes to sexuality, we often carry what we thought and what we felt at that age when we started learning about sex and we started developing our narrative. That actually that's still there. And I think that's a really important part to remember as we're putting it into healing, is that it's one thing to be like, I'm an adult now, I get it. But it's like that inner stuff is still there. Like what your son learned about the sex talk, for example, if you hadn't stepped in and showed him the different perspective, he's going to carry that with him. And it's going to come up. It's going to show up in the relationships he has with other women, and the relationship especially he has with himself.
Which is why I think it's so important to have talks like this, and for parents to try to be more open with their kids about sexuality, about sex, about all of that stuff, the intimacy that goes with it, the connection with another human being, the importance of that, what it really means, and it's just taken so lightly now all over the place. Everything is just extremely sexualized, and all the meaning is just going out the window.
I feel dirty.
I think a lot of it is we're not taking the time to ask, why do we want to have sex? Whether that be ourselves, our children, what is the reason? Because again, if your reason is external, like, well, because they want to have sex with me, or because all my friends are doing it, or, anything along those lines, it's like, we probably need to think about what we're doing, because
I
those
think
shouldn't be the
I
reasons
think
why
most
you
people,
want to have sex.
that's the approach, the outer one. Like, I don't think people.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter, all of
It's
my daughters actually came to me when they lost their virginity. My oldest one, her big question was, is it always going to hurt like that? You know what I mean? And of course, as a mom, I was like, yeah, it is.
Yes.
Keep those legs crossed.
Terrible. Don't do it anymore.
It only gets worse.
Yeah,
But then I stepped back and I said, of course it doesn't. Or I wouldn't still be doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wouldn't still be a thing, and people wouldn't be doing it in the streets or in the subways or anywhere. So clearly it's going to get better. It just don't need to get better this year.
Or next.
Or next, or ever.
It doesn't get good till you're 30.
Right. But it was a great question that I got, and I'm really interested because a lot of you I know all of you know Lee's story, and if you've watched our other videos, you'll know a lot of Lee's story. But when it came to sex, and Lee's life is a whole other ballgame, and how it was part of the inside manifesting on the outside, or I worded that wrong. What you were using sex as a way to feel better. Is that what that was, or?
It was for me, from a boy to a man, the experience of communication in that way was much more powerful, because it is a form of communication. And we treat it like it's not, but it is. Especially when you keep everything else hidden, that would be how you become vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've come to a space where, from a boy to a man, where I didn't learn to communicate as a man, or a boy for that matter, when it came to love, when it came to what my body was feeling, what my heart was feeling, what my emotions were.
Mm-hmm.
But in that way, it could feel expressed. And when it was expressed, it felt free.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't last very long, but it was. It was something that just kind of left a euphoric moment, and then I couldn't wait to the next time. And it became almost like you were chasing something just to feel and say something.
Yeah.
It didn't require any words. It didn't require any ability of you doubting yourself or feeling like you couldn't be completely exposed. See, I believe that way we look at the relationship we have to sex, as a man or as a woman, we still are having a dialogue with ourselves that shows up when we have sex.
Mm.
It should be just as free and it should feel just as good, but we underutilize it. We don't even see that sharing your body means you could share your mind too.
Amen to that. Yeah,
And
that's
that
so true. I mean, that's so powerful, because even when you just described that, Lee, I was thinking about an ex that I had and feeling like the only time we connected, right,
Yeah.
was when we had sex. And it was that relationship actually that made me think there's got to be something more than this. I should be able to have a strong connection with someone without the act of sex. And I feel like, and I think that's what led me to believe that when I finally found that and found that was true, that you can have this amazing intensity and passion in a relationship without even having sex, and then adding sex on top of that just ends up being, explosive. It's like, that's what this is all really about. It's about this finding that connection within yourself and your partner, so that you're connecting on a level that's deeper than just the sexual experience, which then just enhances that sexual experience.
Isn't it interesting how it's true words have never been spoken? Because isn't it interesting how we, especially as young adults and younger people, but a lot of times when our self-esteem is low, we're not feeling good about ourselves. And let's be honest, it happens all the time. And we find someone who is really nurturing when it comes to sex. how we turn that into that's what we want from them, more and more and more and more and more.
Right.
And we don't want to get to know them. We don't as much as we should. We just want to have that sexual experience with them because it takes us to a deeper space and it makes us feel good about ourselves because
Like whole, it makes us feel complete.
yeah, we think it makes us feel whole.
Right.
And then versus someone we're in a relationship with, they come in and get the deed done and get out. Someone who actually comes in and is nurturing and loving and touching and is sharing in the experience with you, how we tend to want to be obsessive with that person and then want to grab onto that.
Right.
And hold on to that experience, that experience and not the emotions that have come along with it. That's how we identify that person loves me.
Yeah.
They must love me because they're being so gentle and so loving and so attentive, right?
Right.
They're trying to actually find the same things we're trying to find. Then as women, we start to become obsessive and want more and more and more of that, right? And in all reality, the people in our lives, when we're going through that, are thinking we're just out to get some sex.
Right.
They're not wanting to know anything about me. This is just another thing for me. Because now they're just obsessed and they're obsessed and wanting to get me in the sack all the time.
Well, sex has that ability to bring out the wholeness that's in you. It's that you seek the other person to find that wholeness when you've already had that wholeness within yourself. That's why it becomes so twisted and becomes something that becomes almost a rejection or an abandonment that you experience when you're by yourself. You don't really go into your head when you masturbate. You really don't go into your head when you're having
just going to
sex.
say something to
But
that.
just as you start looking at it, just as you start going into it, you feel a whole bunch of energy coming from the other person that you're sharing. And like I said, you're communicating. And there is none of that misdirection, misreflection. You actually are experiencing being in your body and speaking in a way that you're whole.
Right.
This brings up the perspective, though. It's like, how can you really, truly allow that kind of vulnerability? I'm going to go off on a slight tangent. If you're not able to appreciate your own body and your own sexuality.
I believe that whether you're a man or a woman, the word you really have to focus on is allow. If you know how to have permission in one aspect, you know how to have permission in another. You're just not seeing the choice of allow.
Yeah, because I knew I grew up where masturbation was dirty.
Who looked at you and told you that?
My grandma.
What exactly? Now I'm curious.
But then you want a boy.
What
Don't
exactly?
touch that or it'll fall off.
Mother.
We just didn't talk about it. It was not
Clearly,
like
we
a
touched
topic.
ourselves way too early.
I want to hear this because what's happened is you also have a grandmother, you have a parent, or you have somebody that you're connected to pointing at you and saying what you're doing, or if you ever do. And once you actually get into that space, it almost becomes obvious that you're going to now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Now
mean?
I have to.
We always do the opposite of what we're told. You're
True.
laughing, but how many of you could say that you know I listened to everything I was told? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So what was that was exactly said to you from grandmother to a girl, I would imagine, that said, masturbation is dirty.
She said masturbation was a sin. That was her wording.
And did you ask her what is a sin? Because that would be interesting all in itself. Well, what is a sin?
We're not going to get into religion.
No, we're not getting into religion. But what
Talk about
happens
sex,
is,
not religion.
what happens is since we all go through this, or we have different definitions for different things,
Right.
What a sin was to her might not have been a sin to you. So it's
Right. I interpret that as it was dirty.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret the
Right.
sin. It was wrong. It was dirty. You don't do it.
So basically,
You don't do it.
what you were told was shame yourself if you do this.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you not only have, now you have the relationship you have to sex, but now you have a relationship to yourself and sex that says shame.
That says shame. Yeah.
Right.
So what happens is now you go walk into relationships, or you're walking into any kind of interaction with somebody sexually, and guess what's going to be attached along with it?
Shame.
So your relationship to sex also would include shame.
I had that all in my marriage because I didn't enter into it as a virgin, and that was something I put on myself, right? That made me feel not good enough, not undeserving of the quality of love that I had with this person. Yeah, it did a lot of.
So then, just hearing what you're saying, I guess my question then becomes, so what happened to your sex, your way of communication when you were in that space? Were you able to get out of your head, or did you find that you would call it a small space in your head and be there? Which case you never communicated really what you really felt.
Right.
You never communicated really what you really. And then the guy, of course, I doesn't feel like I'm sleeping with a dead woman, is probably some of the things he probably said in his head without knowing that there was a space there where it comes with shame. It comes with shame. Most of us want to just, rip each other's clothes off and do all kinds of things to one another, but if we're in our head about it. And this is not, like I said, this is not descriptive of a man or a woman. Both experience it.
Right.
I've been in a relationship where
they believe that size has something to do with it. They believe that their abilities have something to do with it, and they're not even paying attention to the sharing energy exchange.
Right.
Communication of what they could be experiencing and saying inside themselves or not saying.
Or what they're doing to themselves. Because Lee, you touched on something earlier where you were talking about how you were looking outside of yourself for connection to get this. I don't know what it is. Like I don't want to wrongly interpret what you said, but you used words something along the lines of, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, of you were searching for someone to make you feel good about you. And I think in that experience of sex, you're having sex to feel something, right? And it's like, and then you do feel something, you have you get an erection, and then you have the output of that. And
it's about the communication. Like I said, it is communication. So in that space, that communication, I wasn't being put down. I wasn't being told I wasn't enough. I wasn't being told that I'm stupid. I wouldn't be. You see what I'm saying? There was no sound or interpretation of words or interpretation of what the person was feeling. I could give all of my energy, and they would receive it. And then they would give me all their energy, and I would receive it. It wasn't really about the exchange of, okay, I'm just going to do this to get off. It was an energy.
That is exactly my point. That's exactly where I was going, is that what a person tends to do in that situation is look outward. Like, this person did this for me. They gave me this. They made me feel this. And then they continue to search for that, not recognizing this is already here within you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to stop, because we've got to get to, I'm sure that we're going to have a ton of questions about this. The beautiful part is I did record, so that way if it's not showing, we can post it on the channel anyway.
Yeah.
But again, real quick, we got Cassie. You want to tell them where you're from?
Jeez,
Oh.
you did.
No, I didn't have that part of the recording, just in case.
Arizona.
All right, awesome. And Heather, where are you from?
Orlando, Florida.
Florida.
Wonderful. And Michelle?
Hopewell Junction, New York.
Awesome. And of course, Gina?
Sacramento, California.
Ow!
These are our top coaches and instructors of our coaching certification program.
We are training them to handle that program for us, and they're already making helping us make major decisions. And I love that. And I love that they're a part of our growing family. And they are.
We love it too.
We love it.
And I will tell you the most beautiful part about them is that they have really started to master being vulnerable with themselves to be able to love a little bit more deeply. And for that, we honor you and we thank you for being here. And
Thank
we
you.
all see you all.
And we have no idea where the hell we recorded this at.
We'll figure it out.
Find it, and we're going to post it right now.
But we're going to post it. It'll be posted in both the groups. And you guys can find it there. If you guys have comments, we're going to do our second discussion, and hopefully all of this will be worked out, all the bugs and kinks. But we really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this.
Yeah, put it in the comments below, your questions. We'll make sure that we're live next time so you guys can interact.
I've got some studying to do apparently.
Oh, you guys can interact and ask us questions on the side here in the little chat feature where we can answer your questions live. That'll be fun.
Ow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So next week, part 2 of How Am I Connected to Sex?
Yes. Thank you guys for today.
Bye.
We'll see you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.